Be me, 26, female. I like to think I have my life pretty well sorted out. Got a good job in the city working in HR for a big company, focused on corporate culture and employee well-being. It's a job where you have to be empathetic, you have to understand people. I'm good at it. My apartment is clean, my social life is active, and I'm always reading books on self-improvement and psychology. I'm a work in progress, but I'm actively doing the work. The only person in my life who seems determined to stay stuck in the past is my older brother. He's 29, a police detective, and he is the most emotionally constipated man I have ever met. It wasn't always this bad. When we were younger, we were close. But the last few years, especially since he made detective, it's like he's been building a wall around himself, brick by brick. Every conversation feels like I'm talking to a heavily redacted document. I know his job is hard. I'm not an idiot. He sees the worst of humanity every single day. That's exactly why I try to help him. I have all these tools and resources from my job and my own research that could genuinely make his life better. He just refuses to even listen. It all started coming to a head a few months back. I think it was late fall. I was calling him on a Tuesday night, just for our weekly catch-up. I was on my couch, nice and cozy, with a cup of herbal tea. He picked up, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice before he even said hello. I asked him how his week was going. He gave me the usual one-word answers. Fine. Busy. Same old? I tried to dig a little deeper, asking if there was anything interesting happening. He let out this long, tired sigh. He told me he was finishing up a really grim case involving a domestic dispute that went sideways. He didn't give me details, he never does, but he mentioned having to talk to the kids who were left behind. My heart went out to him. This is exactly the kind of stuff that eats away at you if you don't process it correctly. So, naturally, I tried to offer some guidance. I explained to him that what he's experiencing is called secondary trauma. It's a well-documented phenomenon for first responders. I told him it's crucial that he finds a way to decompress these experiences. Otherwise, they'll calcify into long-term stress and burnout. I suggested he try a simple mindfulness exercise, just 5 minutes of focusing on his breath when he gets home, to separate his work life from his personal life. Silence on the other end of the line. I wasn't deterred. I know it can be hard for men to accept this kind of help. I then suggested he could try journaling, just writing down the basic facts of the day, his objective observations, to get them out of his head and onto paper. I even knew a great app for it, one that gives you prompts so you don't have to stare at a blank page. More silence. I could hear the sound of his car's turn signal clicking. "Are you listening?" I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle and encouraging. He finally spoke. "Yeah, I'm listening." His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. I told him I'd send him a link to an article about it. He just said, "Okay, hey, I'm pulling up to my place. I gotta go." And he hung up before I could even say goodbye. I felt a little frustrated, but I told myself it was a start. He was probably just overwhelmed and needed time to think about it. I sent him the link right away. The article was titled "Beyond the Badge: Coping Mechanisms for High-Stress Professions." He never acknowledged it. A couple of weeks later, we were talking again. This time he sounded a little more upbeat. He mentioned that he and a few of his buddies from the force had spent their Saturday at a shooting range out in the country. He was describing how it was a beautiful day, and how good it felt to just focus on a target and blow off some steam. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I waited for him to finish, and then I gently pointed out the potential issue with his choice of hobby. I explained that using firearms as a form of stress relief is problematic, because it reinforces the connection between violence and emotional release. It's a form of sublimation, sure, but it's not a healthy one. He's not processing his stress. He's just channeling his aggression into a more destructive, albeit socially acceptable format. I suggested that there were so many healthier ways to blow off steam. What about rock climbing? That requires focus and physical exertion, or maybe kayaking. Being out on the water is proven to be calming. Even just going for a long run in the woods would be better for his mental state. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, in a very low voice, "It's just shooting targets, Freya. It's not that deep." I sighed. Of course he would think that. It's the classic male defense mechanism: dismiss and downplay. I told him that everything is that deep when it comes to our mental health. The little habits are the ones that define our overall state of being. He didn't have a response to that. He just mumbled something about having to check on his laundry and ended the call. The pattern was getting pretty clear. Anytime I offered a genuine insight, he would shut down. The real turning point, I think, was the conversation about his girlfriend. Emma. She's nice enough, I guess. A bit too traditional for my taste. She's a nurse, very sweet, very quiet. He'd been dating her for about a year. He called me one weekend afternoon, and he sounded really happy. He was telling me that Emma had surprised him by cooking this huge, elaborate dinner for him the night before. A perfect medium-rare steak, garlic mashed potatoes, all his favorites. He said it was the best thing he'd eaten in months, and that it felt so good to just come home and be taken care of after a brutal week. I listened patiently. When he was done, I asked him a simple question. Does she challenge you? He was confused. What do you mean? I explained. I said that it's wonderful that she cooks for him, but a partnership should be about more than just domestic comfort. A real partner should challenge you to grow. They should engage you in deep conversations, question your assumptions, push you to be a better version of yourself. I asked him if he and Emma ever talk about big topics, like politics or philosophy, or the societal impact of his work. Or do they just exist together in a comfortable silence? I told him that it sounded like he was falling into a very conventional, almost a patriarchal relationship dynamic, where the woman's role is to provide comfort and care, and the man's role is to be the stoic provider. I said I was worried he was choosing a partner who enabled his emotional avoidance rather than one who would help him break through it. The silence on the phone that time was different. It wasn't tired or confused. It was cold. He said, "You don't know anything about our relationship." I tried to backtrack a little, saying I was only looking out for his long-term happiness. He didn't care. "I have to go," he said. The call ended. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, he started screening my calls. I'd call, it would ring 4 or 5 times, then go to voicemail. I would leave cheerful, concerned messages. "Hey, just calling to check in. Hope you're having a good week. Talk soon." No response. I tried texting. I kept it light. I sent him funny memes, pictures of my cat. Nothing. After about 2 weeks of this, I was getting seriously worried and, honestly, a little pissed off. This wasn't just avoidance anymore. It was blatant disrespect. I decided I needed to be more direct. I sat down one evening and composed a long, carefully worded text message. I told him that I knew he was avoiding me and that I understood he was probably feeling overwhelmed. But I also told him that shutting people out is a symptom of a deeper issue. I explained that his inability to engage in emotionally challenging conversations was a classic sign of toxic masculinity, that this societal pressure on men to be strong and silent was actually crippling them, preventing them from forming true, meaningful connections. I told him that I wasn't judging him. I was offering him a lifeline. I ended it by saying that I loved him, and that I would always be here to help him do the work whenever he was ready. I hit send and felt a sense of relief. I had been clear, honest, and compassionate. I had laid all my cards on the table. I saw the 3 little dots appear. He was typing a response. I held my breath. This was it. The breakthrough. The dots disappeared. No message came through. A few minutes later, I checked again. The message still said, "Read." He had read it and had chosen to say nothing. The next day I tried calling him. It rang once, then a beep. He had declined the call, not just ignored it. He had actively pressed the end call button. I stared at my phone in disbelief. The audacity. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. One ring, then nothing. He was stonewalling me. After I had poured my heart out to him and offered nothing but support, I started to get angry, really angry. Who did he think he was? I complained to my friends over brunch that weekend. They were all completely on my side. "That's so typical," one of them said. "Men can't handle it when a woman is more emotionally intelligent than they are. Their egos are too fragile." Another one chimed in. "You're offering him a gift, and he's spitting in your face. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped." They validated everything I was feeling. It wasn't my fault. It was his problem, his inability to cope, his masculine fragility. Feeling emboldened, I called our dad. I vented to him for a solid 10 minutes, about how his son was icing me out, how he was refusing to communicate, how worried I was about his mental state. My dad listened patiently. He has that same stoic quality as my brother, but he's usually a bit more receptive. When I was finished, there was a pause. "Well," he said, his voice calm and even, "maybe you should just leave him be for a while." I was flabbergasted. "Leave him be? Dad, he's clearly going through something. He needs support." "He's a grown man, Freya," my dad said. "He's a detective. He deals with tough situations for a living. I think he can handle his own business. Sometimes, the best support you can give someone is a little bit of space." I couldn't believe it. He was taking his side. "So you're saying I should just do nothing while my brother spirals?" I asked, my voice rising. "I'm saying he's not a broken appliance that you need to fix," he replied. "Give the kid a rest." He changed the subject after that, asking about my work. I hung up the phone, feeling completely and utterly alone in this. I was the only one who could see the flashing red warning lights. Everyone else was content to just let him crash and burn. The next few weeks were radio silent. I stopped calling and texting. Fine. If he wanted space, I would give him space. I told myself it was his loss. He was pushing away the one person who was actually willing to get in the trenches with him. My anger slowly simmered down into a kind of sad resignation. I focused on my own life. I went to yoga. I met up with friends. I excelled at my job. But in the back of my mind, there was this constant nagging worry. The silence from him was like a void. It felt unnatural, unsettling. I kept telling myself that eventually he would come around. He would hit a low point, realize he couldn't handle it on his own, and he would finally call me. I was prepared to be gracious when he did. I wouldn't say "I told you so." I would just listen. But the call never came. The silence just stretched on. A month went by, then 6 weeks. I started to wonder if I should just drive over to his apartment and confront him. But my pride stopped me. I had reached out. The ball was in his court. And then, on a perfectly normal Wednesday afternoon, my world tilted on its axis. I was in the middle of a big presentation at work. I was walking a group of new managers through a seminar on fostering psychological safety in the workplace. I was in my element. I was confident, articulate, and passionate. My phone, which I had set to silent, started vibrating in my pocket. I ignored it. It was probably just a spam call. It stopped and then immediately started vibrating again. And again. And again. A cold feeling washed over me. This was not normal. I excused myself from the conference room, my heart starting to pound in my chest. I pulled out my phone. 6 missed calls from my dad, and 1 new voicemail. My finger trembled as I tapped to play the voicemail. My dad's voice came through, strained and rushed. "Freya, it's Mom. She collapsed. Chest pains. We're at St. Michael's downtown. Get here as fast as you can. I'm trying to reach your brother." The world went blurry. St. Michael's. Okay. I grabbed my bag, my hands shaking so hard I could barely work the zipper. I mumbled a panicked apology to the managers in the conference room, something about a family emergency, and practically ran out of the building. My first thought, my only thought, was Caleb. He would know what to do. He's the calm one, the practical one. He handles crises for a living. I stabbed at his contact on my phone as I power walked to the parking garage. 1 ring. Beep. Call declined. Raw panic clawed at my throat. No, not now. I called again. 1 ring. Beep. I practically screamed in frustration. He couldn't be doing this. Not today. I sent a text, all caps. "Dad called. Mom is at St. Michael's. Heart attack. Answer your damn phone." I sent another. "Caleb, this is not a joke. Emergency." I jumped in my car, my mind racing. He had to have seen it. He had to call back. I drove towards the hospital, checking my phone at every red light. Nothing. No call. No text. The message notifications just showed "delivered." Not even read. How could he be so petty, so wrapped up in his own silent protest, that he would ignore a message like that? The hospital was pure chaos. The emergency room waiting area was a scene from a disaster movie. People were crying, yelling, bleeding. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. I pushed my way to the reception desk, a high counter protected by a plexiglass shield. A woman with tired, indifferent eyes was typing on a computer. I leaned in, my voice shaking. "Hi, my mother was just brought in. Heart attack. Her name is..." The woman didn't even look up. "If she was brought in by ambulance, she's in the back. A doctor will be out to speak with the family when there's an update. Please take a seat. But can you just tell me if she's okay? What room is she in? I pleaded. She finally looked at me and her eyes were like steel. Ma'am, I have 20 other families asking me the same thing. We don't give out information over the counter. Take a seat. I stood there, stunned. This wasn't how it was supposed to work. In my world, you communicated. You established rapport. You found a resolution. This woman was a brick wall. I tried a different approach, the one I use at work. I softened my voice. I understand you're incredibly busy, and I really appreciate what you do. This is just a very stressful situation for my family. Any small piece of information would be a huge help. She gave me a look that could curdle milk. Take a seat. Defeated, I stumbled over to the uncomfortable plastic chairs and sank into one. I tried calling Caleb again. One ring. Beep. I felt a surge of helpless fury. Where was he? How could he do this to us? To me? I was the one here, alone, trying to navigate this bureaucratic nightmare while he was probably sulking in his apartment because his little sister hurt his feelings. My dad arrived about 20 minutes later, looking older than I'd ever seen him. He just hugged me, and we sat there in silence. He'd tried Caleb too. No luck. He's probably on a big case, my dad said, trying to make an excuse. But I could hear the doubt in his voice. We waited, and waited. Every time a doctor came through the doors, we would jump up, only to watch them go to another family. An hour passed, then another. It was torture. My mind was filling with worst-case scenarios. I felt completely, utterly useless. My skills, my knowledge, my entire professional identity meant nothing here. You couldn't reason with a heart attack. You couldn't have a compassionate dialogue with a hospital policy. I was just another scared person in a waiting room, stripped of all my perceived competence. And then I saw him. Caleb walked through the automatic doors. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a plain gray hoodie. But he moved with a purpose that cut through the chaos of the room. His eyes scanned the area, found us, and he walked straight over. He didn't look at me, only at our dad. "What's the latest?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Nothing," my dad said, his voice cracking with relief. "They won't tell us anything." Caleb just nodded. He looked around, assessed the situation, and then walked directly to the reception desk. I watched, expecting him to get the same stone wall treatment I did. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He waited for the nurse to finish her sentence, and then he leaned in slightly. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw him slide something across the counter, his badge. The nurse's entire demeanor changed. She sat up straighter. She picked up her phone. She spoke into it quietly, then hung up. "Doctor, Evans will be right out to speak with you," she said to him, her voice now filled with a deference that made me sick. "He's the attending cardiologist." Caleb just gave her a short nod and walked back to us. I was fuming. It was that simple? A little piece of metal, and suddenly all the rules didn't apply? The unfairness of it was staggering. 2 minutes later, a doctor came out, looking for us. He shook Caleb's hand first. The doctor explained everything. Mom had a severe blockage. They had performed an angioplasty, inserted a stent. The procedure was successful. She was stable, sedated, and they were moving her to the cardiac care unit. Caleb listened, his face a mask of concentration. He asked a series of short, intelligent questions. "What's the prognosis for recovery? What's the follow-up care plan? Are there any contraindications with her existing medications?" He was getting clear, concise answers. The doctor was treating him like a peer, an equal. My dad and I just stood there, invisible. Once we knew Mom was out of immediate danger, a wave of relief washed over me, and right behind it came the rage. Caleb said he needed to make a call to update the family. He stepped away into a quieter corner of the hallway. This was my chance. I followed him. I waited until he hung up the phone. "Where were you?" I hissed, my voice trembling with anger. "I called you. I texted you. Dad called you. Mom could have been dying, and you were what? Pouting?" He turned to face me slowly. There was no emotion on his face, no anger, no guilt, nothing. It was the same look I saw on his face when he was at a crime scene, detached, analytical. "I wasn't pouting, Freya," he said, his voice perfectly level. "And you didn't call me. You couldn't have. I blocked your number 3 weeks ago." The words hit me like a physical blow. Blocked. He hadn't just ignored me, he had erased me. Dad got a hold of me on my work line, he continued, his eyes locked on mine. Which is for emergencies only. This qualified. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my mind reeling. You want to know why? He asked, though it wasn't a real question. I'll tell you why. I'm a detective. My job involves facts, evidence, and timelines. So, let's review the evidence. He took a small step closer, invading my space. Fact. 4 months ago, I told you about a bad case. In response, you diagnosed me with secondary trauma and prescribed mindfulness and journaling. Fact. 3 months ago, I told you I went to the shooting range with my friends. You called my hobby a problematic sublimation of aggression and suggested I take up kayaking instead. Fact. 2 months ago, I told you my girlfriend cooked me a nice dinner. You questioned her intellectual capacity and suggested our relationship was based on a patriarchal dynamic. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Every single time I shared a piece of my life with you, you took it, analyzed it, and handed it back to me as a problem that you, and only you, could solve. You didn't see a brother. You saw a project, a case study in toxic masculinity. I tried to interrupt, to defend myself. That's not true. I was just trying to help you. I care about you. My voice sounded weak and pathetic, even to my own ears. He held up a hand, silencing me instantly. No, he said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. Helping is listening. Helping is asking, what do you need? You never once did that. You just told me what I needed. You turned every conversation into a lecture, a performance of your own emotional superiority. He looked me up and down, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was pity. My life is filled with noise, Freya. Victims crying, suspects lying, sirens wailing. The last thing I need when I get home is another voice in my head telling me I'm doing everything wrong. So I made a professional decision, he said, the words landing like hammer blows. I identified a recurring source of stress and negativity in my life, a source that was detrimental to my mental health. He took a final step closer, and his voice dropped to a near whisper. And then I eliminated it. I set a boundary. I believe that's the term you use at your job, isn't it? He didn't wait for an answer. He just turned around and walked back down the hallway towards the elevators that would take him up to the CCU, to our mother. I was left standing alone in the hallway of the emergency room. The sounds of the hospital, the beeping machines, the distant announcements, all of it faded away. All I could hear was the echo of his words. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't insulted me. He had simply taken all of my theories, all of my jargon, all of my well-intentioned help, and he had methodically, clinically used it to build a case against me, and he had won. I stood there for I don't know how long, the expert on communication, on empathy, on well-being, and I had been so completely blind to the fact that to my own brother, I had become the very thing I claimed to fight against, a toxic source of relentless, unsolicited judgment. The person he needed to be protected from was me.